Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 2 of the Pro-American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. Tonight we are here up in Lakeland, Florida for round number 4 of the season. We're here at the virtual USA International Speedway, a track that has actually only existed in the real world for a shorter period of time than the iRacing.com platform has been online. This track opened back up in 1995, closed in 2012. Needless to say, not around for a very long time, but despite that, is a track that has a whole lot of history here on the iRacing.com platform as being one of the free tracks that comes to new players with their subscription. All of these drivers here in the Pro American Late Model Series got their roots at this speedway. So needless to say, bound to be a pretty darn fun one here this evening. Shane Kohlmeyer coming into tonight's event as our championship points leader, just 1 point ahead of Kenny Tripp. And speaking of Kenny Tripp, as we make our way down to the starting grid for our first heat race of the evening, Kenny Tripp going to be starting us off on the pole of this one. To his outside, another driver that is pretty high up in the championship standings. He is a driver that is just behind him. The first driver that has a win to his name in the championship standings. That's going to be the 77 of Mark Whitley. Back in position number 3, that is the 42 of Mr. Dylan Hahn, with the 38 of Christian Tinkler starting at his outside to make up row number 2. Fifth place can go back to that 36 of Mr. Will Salamander Salamone, with Gerard Lawrence in the 27, making his return after being unable to attend the last couple of races. Gerard Lawrence in that 27 El Sasser Race Engines entry was the champion of season number 1, and tonight he's going to see if he can't start climbing his way up to a second one. 7th place, that's going to be the track pass number 18 of Braden Fuller, with Tommy Mitchell in the 6 machine, rounding out this 8-car heat race here this evening. 23 drivers did register for tonight's event here tonight, though, so it does look like we should be getting one driver and only one driver eliminated from our main event, which is always a little bit unfortunate to see, but makes these heat races just that much more significant. These aren't just for starting positions in the main event anymore. These are for actual ability to make it into the A main here tonight. That said, as we come through turn number 4, the iRacing.com pace car is going to be making its way down to the safety of pit lane here this evening. Mark Whitley, Kenny Tripp, your front row drivers. Green flag up in the air for the first time at the USA International Speedway, and we are rolling. Side by side through turns 3 and 4, all of the top 5 of these drivers all completely under a blanket. Willem Salmon back in that 36 Hot Wheels entry. He is still a part of this battle as well. Still completely under a blanket as we complete the first lap here this evening. Mark Whitley, Kenny Tripp making a little bit of contact together, but both of them still have it rolling. And down into 3 and 4, still side by side. Not a whole lot of room for these drivers to work with. This is one of the larger tracks on the speedway that we've been to here this season, but that is not going to be stopping these drivers from treating it like we are at a tiny little bull ring here this evening. Kenny Tripp, Mark Whitley, still your race leaders as we cross the line, going to be making that 12 laps left to go here. And again, all completely nose to tail in this battle for the lead, completely under a blanket for all of these late model drivers. No one will be giving an inch here this evening. The top 5 going to be locking themselves into the A main here this evening. Everyone outside of that will be moving on down to the consolation race to try and race their way into tonight's event. So Tripp, Hahn, Whitley, Tinkler, these four drivers are all just battling it out for starting position right here at the moment as we cross the line for 10 laps to go. The rest of them have to try and battle their way into the main event, and currently Will Salamone, that Hot Wheels entry, is going to be the driver that is on the cut line this evening. As long as he can hold on to this spot, he locks himself into the main event, but that is still a very big what if for the driver out of Inver Groves Heights. That said, he has built up a decent bit of a gap to Braden Fuller. Braden, that driver out of South Boston, driving for Track Pass. He has to catch up to Salamone if he wants to lock himself into the main event. If nothing else, where he is right now, he'll have the comfort of mind of starting in first place in the consolation race if he ends up there. But generally speaking, you don't want to end up in that consolation race in the first place if you are able to help it. But looking at the gap between these drivers, it just keeps getting bigger time and time again, lap after lap. So Fuller has his work cut out for him if he wants to catch back up to that number 36 machine. It is not going to be easy. And look at the lap times. Last time by, Salamone was faster than Fuller by about 0.02 of a second, which in the grand scheme of things really does not sound like a whole lot, but we only have 15 laps to work with here, so that adds up very, very quickly. Battle for the lead is closing up, though. Dylan Hahn has caught up to Kenny Tripp. Or excuse me, no, Whitley there. The Harpoon design number 77 has caught up to Hahn. Hahn, the driver that took home the win last week in his debut race with the series. Currently, Hahn being scored back to the 23rd position in the championship standings as he was unable to attend the first two rounds. Either way, a very, very impressive showing last week at Langley, and now a very impressive showing here at the USA International Speedway. Kenny Tripp, though, as these two duke it out back in the battle for second, Tripp has gotten himself a little bit of a lead to work with here in that temp setters machine. Got it up to about a little under 4/5 of a second. Now, just like that, through turns 3 and 4, up to a full second between himself and the rest of the field. 2 laps left to go for the driver out of Lewiston, Maine, and right now things are looking pretty good for him. Especially as the battle back for second heats up even further. Christian Tinkler has gotten himself caught up into this battle as well in that 38 machine. As the white flag is up in the air, the driver on the transfer line, Will Salamone, has a 1.7 second gap between himself and Braden Fuller, so things are looking a-okay for Salamone on that transfer line. Right now, we're looking at the battle for second between Whitley, Hahn, and Tinkler. Coming out of turns 3 and 4, Kenny Tripp going to take home the heat race win. Whitley second, and it looks like Tinkler is going to be given the third position over Hahn by just about, it looks like 0.04 of a second. Quite a photo finish for the third position in this first heat race, but just like that, drivers are making their way on down to the starting grid to get themselves sorted out for heat race number 2. Starting out on the pole of this one, that is the 34 Exalta entry. That is Paul Hartwig Jr. with the 85 of Brandon Kiger in that Ghost entry starting to his outside. Third place can go back to the Droppin' Bombs race in number 10, a Steven Rex with the Taco Bell 66 of Brent Mix rolling it off P number 4. Fifth place Gonna go back to Wesley Ray Jr. in the Mobile 1 entry with the 5 of Derek Colson rounding out row number 3 for the Tony Stewart Foundation. 7th, gonna go back to Mr. Johnny B in the Sim Experience entry with Art Hendren in that all-black number 37, rounding out this second heat race here this evening. Again, 15 laps is the distance, and only the top 5 will be locking themselves into the main event here this evening. So we do have another way to go around the speedway as we get everything all sorted out here. What an event, what a season it has been for these late model drivers. Brandon Kiger came home inside the top 3 last week at Langley, now starting off up in the front row of his heat race. He has been having a very solid season in that number 85. And if I do remember correctly, when we talked to him in the post-race last week, he said that this was an event that he was looking forward to. So definitely a driver we're going to have to keep our eye on here this evening and see just how things work out for him. Paul Hartwig, though, the driver to his inside in that 34 Exalta entry, he did have the fastest time in practice. So he's also going to be a driver that has to be looked out for here. Green flag up in the air, though. We are all rolling here this evening. Hartwig off to a pretty solid start, but there are late models trying to use every single possible line there is just behind them. Brent Max having to slow up just a little bit. He got stuck up on the outside line. He just trying to get down out of that freight train, and Art Hendren's around. Hendren down into the inside wall. He's going to bring it back out on the speedway, though. No caution going to come out for the driver of that 37 machine. We are all still rolling around the speedway. Looks like he just got a little bit loose coming out of the corner. Rear end snapped out around behind him, and that's all it took to get that late model round. Throughout the field, though, everyone, for the most part, single filed out here. Paul Hartwig still in control of this first heat race. Steven Rex, Brandon Kiger, your top 3 with Wesley Ray Jr., the Mobile 1 entry rolling back and forth, and Brent Mex, that Taco Bell number 66. That is the driver on the cut line for this heat race. Derek Colson just behind, looking like he has a pretty decent chance to battle his way into this main event here. He has only about 0.2 of a second of a gap between himself and Mex. That is a gap that he can work with to try and break his way inside the top 5. Johnny B, the driver, back in 7th. A little bit further back, about 0.8 of a second behind that 5 of Derek Colson in 6th. Mex also looking to try and make a move on Wesley Ray Jr. He thought about it just a little bit. He backed out of the move just a bit. But again, Mex is there. Mex is wanting to try and make this pass. Sure, a little bit of a nudge higher up in the starting position for the main event's always nice, but right now I think Mex just wants to have Derek Colson be someone else's problem right now. Any sort of buffer that these drivers can get from the cut line is definitely a very good thing to have. Because after all, this is your main ticket into the main event right here, race fans. If you don't make it inside the top 5, you move on to a second race that you have to battle your way through. And I'll tell you what, race fans, when you're in that last chance qualifier, it is for all the marbles. You have to throw everything you've got at your competitors, so the stress level going to be a lot higher for all of these drivers that end up having to move to that consolation race to try and get into the main event this evening. Still looking down at the battle on the cut line, though. Colson has fallen back just a bit, so now it's just Mex and Ray up here. duking it out for 4th position. Mex has got a little bit of breathing room, but he still has to be wary. If he tries too hard to get around Wesley Ray Jr., then he might end up costing himself time that will allow Coulson to catch back up. As a big high five goes up in the air, though, 5 laps left to go for our second heat race. 5 laps to determine who makes it in to the A main and who has to work their way through the consolation race later this evening. A little bit further up the field, there's a bit of a gap between Wesley Ray Jr. and Brandon Kiger, but these 3 drivers all duking it out for the lead, also under a little bit of a blanket. Rex and Kiger in particular really nose to tail here, and Kiger is closing the gap on Rex with every single lap, and actually that time by Rex has closed the gap a bit on our race leader as well. Kiger thought about going for the pass there in that 85, backed out of it last possible second, but for just a moment there, he was thinking about trying to make something stick there. Not quite enough of a run to make it work though, and it's 2 laps left to go. Still, call it about 0.2 of a second between all of these lead lap drivers. If Hartwig manages to take home the win of the heat race, that would have him starting in the 2nd position. So first driver on the outside row in our main event. That's a pretty nice place to be at in a 150 lap event, which we have later this evening. White flag gonna go up in the air though one more time around the speedway, and Paul Hartwig Jr. is going to be the driver that gets it done. Coming out of turn number 4, then it's going to be Steven Rex, Brandon Kiger, Wesley Ray Jr., and Brent Mex, your drivers that lock themselves into the A main. Coulson, Johnny B, and Art Hendren all going to be sent back to the last chance qualifier. They're going to have to battle their way into this main event later here this evening. And just like that, it's time for heat race number 3 for these late model drivers. Starting out at the front of this one, that's going to be another driver that has taken home a win here this season. That's going to be the 83 of Chase Johnson. Starting his outside, that is the 23 Portland Glass entry of Jonathan Emerson. Back in 3rd place, that's the Lucas Oil 88 of Mr. Scott Benedicts, with the 126 of John Friley in the Sundrop, starting off in position number 4. 5th place, going to go back to that drop and bombs race in number 17 of Sean Patrick, with Mr. PJ Thomas in the 26, starting it off in the 6th position. 7th place, going to go back to the 32 of Mr. Justin Phipps, going to be rounding out our 3rd heat race of the evening. And once again, the same rules apply as they have for the past couple of heat races. Going to be 15 laps, caution laps do not count. Top 5 locks themselves into our main event here this evening. The rest of them, well, they gotta go on down to the consolation race and hope that they can make their way into the main that way. 22 drivers going to be making our 150 lap feature event here for round number 4 at USA International Speedway. And of course, the rest of them always going to be welcome to try again next week at the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. That's it. iRacing.com pace cars off. We're going to be trying this one again. Heat race number 3, green flag up in the air, and we are all rolling here this evening. Little bit of a bobble on corner entry for Jonathan Emerson. He's going to filter right back in, and trouble as well. John Friley in that 126 going way up high in the Sundrop entry. Nearly up into the outside wall. He's got it pointed in the right direction, but that's going to move him outside of the comfort zone. He's all the way back in 6th now. He's got some work to do if he wants to get his way back into our feature event here. Of course, there is always the last chance qualifier. But right now, John Friley not in a very comfortable position here this evening. Chase Johnson leading the way through turns 3 and 4, holding on to the front of this event without too much he has to worry about. Jonathan Emerson just behind, rolling it in P2, only a little bit over a 1/10 of a second between these drivers. Scott Benedict's also up here in the front of this one. A little bit further back, a little bit more room that he has to play with. But everyone in your top 3 all within half of a second of each other. Then a little bit of a gap back to Sean Patrick and P.J. Thomas. But Thomas, he has a lot to worry about right now. John Friley, he is right there in that 126. Maybe a little bit flustered from that mistake in turn number 1, but now he is back here with a vengeance. He is ready to try and get his way back inside the top 5. He is ready to try and push that sun drop entry into our main event here this evening. Not going to be easy. It does look like a little bit of trouble just ahead of him. P.J. Thomas may be having a little bit of internet connection issues in that Bob Subs 28 machine. Always a little bit treacherous trying to pass a race car that you can't quite see, but right now it looks like things have stabilized for that 28 driver. With Riley within 2/10 of a second of Thomas, he just has to get around him and he can get his way into tonight's A main without too much of a hassle. And Thomas, it looked for a moment that he was going to try and make the pass on Sean Patrick. I don't know if that's necessarily what he wants to be doing right this moment, because every time he tries to make a pass and it doesn't stick, that is time he is losing that allows Friley and Justin Phipps to get even closer to that number 26 entry. 7 laps left to go though, so we are halfway through this first heat race. And P.J. Thomas having the pressure put to him here this evening. Well, that's not the only battle breaking out here on the speedway. Chase Johnson and Jonathan Emerson, these two drivers battling it out for the lead, still nose to tail just like that. Scott Benedict's losing ground on our race leaders, but Johnson and Emerson are battling it out like they're already in the main event, trying to battle it out for the win of the actual feature. I don't know about y'all race fans, but I don't want to go down there and tell them that this is still just the heat race, because this is a pretty fun little battle they've got going on. Big high five goes up in the air for our third heat race this evening, though. Gonna be 4 laps left to go for these late model drivers. And there is a pass further back in the field. Sean Patrick now on the transfer line, and he has John Friley down to his inside. P.J. Thomas got around both of them. John Friley making the pass, and Justin Phipps, he's down below Sean Patrick as well, so he is more than likely going to be making the pass here in turns 1 and 2. And sure enough, just like that, Sean Patrick in a single lap down from a comfortable 4th place all the way back to 7th. Patrick now finding himself in the danger zone. He's going to have to race his way into tonight's main event if he can't get back around Friley and Phipps here. Now, of course, he does have Phipps pushed up to the high line, so he does have a little bit of opportunity to pass that 32, but that's not going to be enough. He has to get around the 126 as well if he wants to get back into the transfer spot. White flag up in the air, though. One more time around the speedway for these late model drivers. And it's mostly single file back here in the transfer spot. Sean Patrick's actually just going to come down and park it. The battle for the lead, though, Chase Johnson, Jonathan Emerson, Scott Benedicts, your top 3 for our third heat race here this evening. That's going to be P.A.L.M.S. and John Friley taking home your top 5 here this evening. They are all transferring into the main event. Justin Phipps and Sean Patrick both going to be booted on down to the consolation race. And just like that, speaking of the consolation race, it is time to get this thing underway. Braden Fuller, exactly as we thought, going to be starting out on the front row of this one. Then it's going to be Derek Colson in the 5, starting to his outside. Third place going to go back to the Mellow Yellow 32 of Justin Phipps, with the Menards number 6 of Tommy Mitchell rounding out the second row of this one. Fifth, going to go back to the 26 of Mr. Johnny B, with Sean Patrick in the 17, finding himself in the 6th position. Seventh, going to go back to the 27 of Gerard Lawrence. And finally, the 37 of Art Hendren, rounding out your 8 drivers here this evening. And we find ourselves in a little bit of a difficult situation here for this consolation race, because it's the top 7 that will be transferring into tonight's main event. So it is quite literally only the driver that comes last in this consolation race that won't be making it into the main event. And actually, I don't know about you race fans, but if my math is correct, I only see 7 late models here on this camera. Gerard Lawrence has not made the starting grid, so if he doesn't come out right now, and looking down at pit lane, it does not look like he is down there. So in that case, everyone here is going to actually lock their way in to our main event here this evening. There is no risk of elimination for any of these late model drivers, as Gerard Lawrence has retired from tonight's event. He has packed up the late model and brought it on home to start getting ready for next week's event. So everyone here, they are safe from elimination, but they still have to battle it out for starting position in our main event here this evening. Derek Colson, Braden Fuller, your front row here this evening. iRacing.com pace car is off. Let's see what these late model drivers are able to do. They have the comfort of knowing that they're not at risk for elimination anymore, but that is not going to stop them from battling it out. And we're 3 wide, lap 1. Johnny B falling back a little bit. That was Tommy Mitchell up in the number 6 Menards entry, the 32 of Justin Phipps. And trouble as Johnny B's around. Just barely. He does manage to hold on to it, but Johnny B almost around there. Everyone rolling around on the speedway now, single file. But for just a moment there was a little bit of a scare that something might have happened to that 26 of Johnny B. Of course, if Gerard Lawrence were able to attend this heat race, that could have been really disastrous for Mr. Johnny B. But now that Lawrence has retired from the event, he is at least under the comfort of knowing that no matter where he finishes now, he will make it into the main event. He will have a shot at the trophy to go for. Braden Fuller building up a little bit of a gap over the rest of the field, already at half a second now, and another half a second between himself and Justin Phipps. That's it. Drivers actually battling out back in the back of the field. Johnny B way up high as Art Hendren tries to get the pass on him way down on the bottom side. Side by side for the 6th position. Johnny B actually making the high line work for him here this evening. Johnny B in that Sim Experience entry. He's got a position back, and it looks like Art Hendren actually might have a little bit of damage to the right front there. Not quite sure what happened to that number 37 machine. Our camera crew is not saying that they saw any signs of a wreck. But looking at left times, it does look like Hendren might have a little bit of damage that's affecting his lap times there. Further up the field, though, currently looking at the battle for the 5th, or actually 4th position here, it looks like. Sure enough, that's Tommy Mitchell and Sean Patrick battling it out for the 4th. Mitchell in that Menards entry finished back in, well, actually last week. That Menards number 6 did not even qualify for the main event, was eliminated in the consolation race after having the largest field of drivers ever before seen in P.A.L.M.S history. But tonight, he's going to be making it into the main event. Going to be trying to compete for the trophy here this evening and trying to bump himself up just a bit in the championship standings coming into tonight's event. Mitchell is being scored back into the 18th position in the championship standings. So has a bit of ground to gain, and tonight could be the night where he makes it happen, race fans. Further up in the field, Justin Phipps has caught up to Derek Colson. Nose to tail for these two drivers in trouble. It looks like Art Hendren has taken the tow down to pit lane. It looks like he might have had some trouble. Let's see if we can't take a quick look back and see what happened to the number 37 machine. Our crews are saying that he went around at some point on the speedway. It's not looking like anything happened to that 37 driver. So I'm not quite sure what happened to him, but he's now being scored down a lap and we can't get the camera crews on him. I'm not quite sure what happened to that number 37 machine, but it is not out on the speedway anymore. 8 laps left to go here in our consolation race. After this, going to be going to our main event for the evening. And we do have a little bit of news down from race control that a little bit of a lucky qualifier tonight will be getting a $5 bonus, and it looks like that will be going to Dylan Hahn, the driver who took home the win last week back at Langley. So definitely exciting to get the news out there. Only 3 races this season going to be having that lucky qualifying spot drawing, as it is something being sponsored by one of the league members. The first one going to be going to Dylan Hahn. Big high five up in the air though. Derek Colson, Justin Phipps still battling it out for second. They both have a pretty big gap they need to make up to our race leader Braden Fuller, but right now these two drivers duking it out for position number 2. All these drivers going to be starting at the tail end of tonight's main event. They will be starting outside of the top 15. So definitely not an ideal place to be in, but even then, every single one of these positions counts. You gotta get yourself in as good of a starting spot as you can, and just have to try and carry that momentum with you throughout the 150 laps of racing we have going on here this evening. 3 laps left to go though. Still the closest battle on the speedway here between Justin Phipps and Derek Wilson. Call it about 0.2 of a second between both of these late model drivers, and with 3 laps left to go, we could definitely see Justin try and make a move on that Tony Stewart Foundation entry here in just a moment. And sure enough, he's going to pull it on alongside as Colson gets a little high out of the corner. Going to back off on corner entry though. Not quite the entry he was looking for. Don't want to dive it in there and potentially cause an incident, because if he cause a yellow here in the heat race, or in this case the consolation race, that could stick with you going into the main event. So right now, looking like all of these late model drivers are on their best behavior. Checkered flag up in the air though. Braden Fuller going to be taking it on home for our consolation race. Then it's going to be Derek Colson, Justin Phipps, Sean Patrick, Johnny V, Tommy Mitchell, and Art Hendren rounding out the rest of this field. Gerard Lawrence going to be the unlucky driver eliminated from our main event as he wasn't able to attend the heat races. And honestly, race fans, it's just a little bit funny how that works out. The driver that was the champion last season of P.A.L.M.S. not being able to qualify for tonight's event. For now though, driver's going to be getting a few minutes to get their car's last minute preparation done, a couple of minutes to maybe take any necessary bathroom breaks before tonight's main event. So for right now, we're going to give these drivers just a moment to get themselves all situated, and we will be right back with our main event here for the USA International Speedway 150. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the USA International Speedway for round number 4 of the Pro American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. Got all of our heat races knocked out, got our consolation race taken care of. Now it's time for our main event here this evening. 150 laps here around this 0.75 mile or 1.2 kilometer long speedway. One of the longest speedways that these drivers have been to here this season. Actually, it is the longest speedway that these drivers have been here this season. About 0.5 of a mile, 0.005 of a mile, excuse me, longer than the Thompson Speedway. So Little bit of a difference here, going to be the longest race that these drivers have to deal with here so far this season. But as we get things rolling around the speedway, let's take a look down at our starting lineup for our main event here this evening. Starting out at the front of this one, it's going to be the 12 of Kenny Tripp, the driver starting in second in the championship standings coming into tonight's event, rolling it off in the front of this race. Second place can go back to Paul Hartwig Jr. in that 34, with Chase Johnson in the 83, and Mark Whitley for Harpoon Design in that 77, making up your first 4 drivers. The Dropping Bombs number 10 is Stephen Rex, going to be rounding out the top 5, with the 23 of Jonathan Emerson rolling off in P number 6. Seventh going to go back to the 38 of Christian Tinkler, with Brandon Kiger in that 85, rolling it off P number 8. Ninth going back to the 88 of Scott Benedicts, with Dylan Hahn in the 42, last week's winner, rolling it off P number 10. 11th going to go back to Wesley Ray Jr. in the 65, with P.J. Damas in the 28, rolling it off P number 12. 13th going back to Mr. Will Salamander Salamone in that 36, with Brent Mex in the 66, starting off P14. 15th going back to John Friley, Braden Fuller in 16th, Derek Colson 17th, Justin Phipps 18th, Sean Patrick, Mr. Johnny V, Tommy Mitchell, and Art Hendren rounding out the remainder of this field. iRacing.com pace car is off. We are going green flag racing here this evening, just like that. We are underway for our main event, and Paul Hartwig Jr. off to a bit of a lead down into turns 1 and 2. He loses that advantage just a bit coming out of the corner, but this is the first time in a little while where we have seen the outside line really have a solid run on the initial start. And just like that, a little bit of a nudge, Tripp and Hartwig making contact, and now we are 3 wide for the lead. Lap number 2 here this evening, and Paul Hartwig, he's going to drop out of the front of that just a little bit. Maybe decided not quite the place he wants to be on lap number 2. Everyone single filing out in our top 3, but just behind, that's Mark Whitley battling it out with Jonathan Emerson. That Harpoon Design driver took home the win a couple of weeks ago back at the Martinsville Speedway. Now finding himself up inside the top 5 right at the start of this one. Going to see if he can't try and make it win number 2 here this evening. A clean start by everyone around the speedway though. Everyone, for the most part, is playing nice with each other right now. We do have some side-by-side battling going on further back in the back of the field. This is Will Salamone and that 42 of Dylan Hahn, last week's winner. Hahn down to the low line here in that 42 machine, battling it out for 12th here this evening. Of course, like we said, 22 drivers in this main event, all duking it out here this evening. And 22 drivers all going to be trying to make it all 150 laps here tonight. Off to a really solid start all throughout the field, even despite that bit of a scare we had going on early into our first couple of laps here. Everyone's starting to settle it out, get everything rolling. And now it's going to be a bit of a matter of settling into a rhythm, waiting for the opportune time to strike, and maybe try and make a couple of passes on pit strategy, because that is definitely going to be playing a big factor here this evening. Currently though, looking at the battle for 7th, that's Brandon Kiger down the low line in the ghost entry. Stephen Rex up on the high line, the number 10. Scott Benedict's there as well in that Lucas Oil entry. And then side by side again, that's PJ Thomas and Brent Mex, 2 drivers we saw duking it out in both their heat race and the consolation race, and now here they are battling it out once again in the main event. And just behind them, that's the driver we were just talking about. That's Dylan Hahn in the 42, the driver who took home the win last week. Already up to 12th, looking to see if he can't break his way into the top 10 and maybe even start the climb up into the top 5. Not going to be easy though. There are a lot of talented drivers all throughout this field, No one is going to be making it easy for each other to make any passes happen here this evening. A little bit further back in the field, a couple of more drivers all battling it out. A little bit further back, Sean Patrick, Justin Phipps. Phipps in that mellow yellow entry. He's actually looking to try and get around Braden Fuller here. Not quite going to have the corner entry he needs to make it happen though. Not quite the corner exit he needed either. He's going to filter on back into line in that mellow yellow entry. Try and defend a little bit from Sean Patrick in the 17. And maybe just try and hold on and get into a rhythm and get himself ready to go. Because after all, 150 laps does not sound like a lot after 225 back at Langley, but you gotta consider the fact that this speedway is nearly twice as long as the one that we were at last week, so 150 laps is a bit of a bigger distance than it initially sounds like. No need to be using your stuff up really early on in this event, but either way, these drivers still battling it out pretty intensely. There's a bit of a nudge there going down the backstretch between Sean Patrick and Justin Phipps. Patrick maybe getting a little bit impatient. He wants to be back up in the front of this thing. 14 laps in the books though. Long way left to go for these late model drivers, and a whole lot of climbing that Patrick has to do if he wants to find himself up inside the top 5 or even the top 10 of tonight's event. A little bit further up the field though, Mark Whitley in that 77 up in the 5th spot, trying to get around Jonathan Emerson. And Paul Hartwig Jr., he's right there too. He has fallen back a little bit from our 2 lead drivers. Now he has to play a little bit on the defensively here this evening. Because Emerson and Whitley, they are 2 very fast drivers, and they are going to want to be getting up inside the top 3 sooner rather than later. All these drivers have built up a pretty decent gap from the rest of the field though. A 3-second gap between the drivers in the top 5 and the driver in 6th. That's going to be the 38 of Christian Tinkler. A 3-second gap, and only 17 laps into tonight's event. Emerson trying to get around Hartwig there, and he's going to pull alongside, going down into turns 1 and 2. Might just be able to make the pass happen. Sure enough, Hartwig going to get a little teeny tiny bit loose off the corner and a little bit scraped against the wall going into 3. And that's going to allow Whitley to get around as well. Hartwig down 2 spots just like that in a matter of corners. Still inside the top 5. Still a very respectable place to be. But I'd imagine the driver of that 30-corner machine is going to want to find himself back up inside the top 3 as soon as he can get himself up there. A little bit further back in the field, drivers are duking it out back in the mid-pack once again. We've got those top 5 that are just completely broken away from the rest of the field. Everyone else, they are all nose to tail still. Currently, we're looking back at Derek Colson, who is running in the 15th position. Which really just goes to show how things are looking around the speedway. We saw Brent Mex up near the front of this pack, and then there's a little bit of a gap between everyone else, but right now call it 10th on back to about 19th are all within 2/10 to 3/10 of a second of the car in front of them. And Dylan Hahn, he's going to pull it down low. He is really pushing that lane wall to get back up to the front of this thing. Will Salomon going to try and make the pass as well. Use the little bit of the push that Hahn gave to that 28 of P.J. Thomas and make the pass as well. And sure enough, down into 3 and 4, it looks like he's just going to make it happen. Will Art Hendren also be able to capitalize on that? Not Art Hendren, that's actually John Friley in the Sundrop entry. Riley's going to go down low, and really not a whole lot that P.J. Thomas can do right now to get out of this freight train. When you're stuck up on the high line like that, until you find a gap that you can get yourself down in. Not a lot you can do, and nearly contact there with the 85. Wesley Ray Jr., that Mobile 1 entry, had a bit of a scare there. He had to really swerve to avoid getting into P.J. Thomas there. Only real option, either end up into P.J. Thomas or have P.J. Thomas get sent into the outside wall. Neither of those really where you want to be. And again, this is the battle all the way back in the 16th and 15th position. So these drivers are really duking it out with everything they've got all around the field here this evening. Even going all the way back to the tail end of the field, Mr. Johnny B and Tommy Mitchell are having a little bit of a battle here as well. They are both duking it out for the 21st position. Johnny B had a little bit of trouble in that consolation race, had a little bit of an incident on lap number 1, and that sent him all the way back to the back of the field. Had him start up into the 20th position, though. He did manage to get a little bit of ground gained at the end of the consolation race, but now having a little bit of difficulty back here in that 26 machine, battling it out with Tommy Mitchell and Art Hendren. Up in the front of the field, though, all these drivers up in the front are all still duking it out. The top 4 all within a second of the race leader. Artwig has fallen back just a bit in that 34. About 2 seconds between himself and the race leaders, and then another 2 seconds between himself and Christian Tinkler. And the yellow flag going to come out, and it looks like the trouble is going to be for P.J. Thomas. Trouble for that number 28. That is the Bob Sub entry going around. Gonna have to take a look back here and see what brought out that first yellow. Initial reports from the truck saying it was definitely P.J. Thomas and maybe also Justin Phipps involved. So let's take a look back here. See if we can't see what all went down for these two late model drivers. Of course, looking down at P.J. Thomas in the Bob Sub entry. Going down into turns 3 and 4 and a little bit of nudge from behind from the 65. And sure enough, Justin Phipps not involved in the incident at all, but he had to slam on the brakes to keep from getting involved in that incident. That was actually between P.J. Thomas and the Mobile 1 entry, the 65 with Wesley Ray Jr. Just a little bit of a nudge too much down in turns 3 and 4, and from there, not a whole lot anyone could do to get the situation rectified. Let's take a moment to ride on board with Justin Phipps, see what he saw going into that corner. Just a little bit of a nudge to the back of that 28. He locks it up. And he does a great job of not getting any damage on that late model, but not the situation that Phipps wanted to find themselves in by any means. Looking around the speedway, though, a lot of drivers electing to make stops. Mark Whitley, Chase Johnson, Wesley Ray Jr., Dylan Hahn, John Friley, Johnny B, Tommy Mitchell. Looks like about half the field electing to come in, the other half electing to stay out. And it seems for most of these drivers, the call is going to be fuel and tires. Maybe not for Mark Whitley, though. Mark only had a 9-second pit stop, so Mark might have only gone fuel only. Sean Patrick as well. Only 7 seconds in his pit stall in that Dropping Bombs number 17, so it looks like the call might have been fuel only for Sean Patrick, but he's coming back down pit lane. So that pit stop might have been so lightning fast because his crew made a bit of an oopsie. That will remain to be seen, though, but him coming back down pit lane again is going to send him all the way back to the back of the field. Only 5 seconds in his pit stall this time, so Doesn't look like he served a penalty. We'll just have to wait for a word from race control to see if they actually had something go awry there. But for now, line them back up 2 by 2. Kenny Tripp, Jonathan Emerson, your front row. And we are going to be going green flag racing just like that. Green flag up in the air. And as we sail it on down into turns number 1, everyone looking pretty good around the speedway. Way up high for Brent Mex in that 66. Mex definitely a bit higher than he intended to be on corner exit there. And we might have a bit of trouble further back in the field. Sure enough, caution flag is out. And there are late models everywhere. Tommy Mitchell, Sean Patrick, Chase Johnson, and it looks like that might have also been Art Hendren around. So just like that, before we even really got things rolling, that's going to be caution number 2 out on the speedway. Gonna have to take a look back here again, see what all went down. Definitely the sun drop, or not the sun drop, the mellow yellow 32 involved. Looking down at Art Hendren in that all black 37 going into the corner, and whatever happened before he got there. Let's take another look back at this. Whatever happened looked like it started with Chase Johnson in that 83, and look who's in front of him. That is the 28. That's the Bob Sub entry of P.J. Thomas. Hopefully P.J. Thomas wasn't involved as well. And actually it looked like it started with a bit of an accordion effect up in the front. We're going to have to take another look back at this with the blimp camera to really break down what all went down here. And let's take a little bit of a jump forward, because it looks like we saw maybe a little bit of contact for Mark Whitley there. It looked like it might have started with either a checkup by the 5 or the 18. No, it started with a checkup with Steven Rex up in the 10, and then everyone just accordioned a little bit, and not everyone could get it stopped here this evening. So that's going to be caution flag number 2 out on the speedway. And a couple of really fast drivers involved. A few more takers down on pit lane. Sean Patrick came back down. Johnny B came back down. Chase Johnson came back down, though that might have been to inspect damage. And then Tommy Mitchell and Art Hendren are both currently down there right now. They are both likely down there with damage from that incident. That's all. Before we go back green flag racing, let's give a quick moment to our friends over at Harpoon Design. .38 laps is the distance completed here this evening. Still got the lights on the iRacing.com pace car. Now they are off, so when we go green flag racing, we will be on lap number 40. And it's sounding like the word from race control here is going to be a single file restart, since those two cautions were so close to each other back to back. Still have 18 late models on the lead lap as it stands right now, though. Kenny Tripp going to lead the field to the green flag here. iRacing.com pace car going to pull it on down to the safety of pit lane. We're going to try this thing again. This time, single file. Green flag up in the air. We're all rolling around the speedway. Everyone playing nicer with each other this time by, as tends to be the nature of single file restarts. Nose to tail for your race leaders. Really nose to tail for just about everyone around the speedway. No really major gaps forming yet, except between Braden Fuller and Sean Patrick, the driver in 18th and the driver in 19th, built up about a full second gap between them, so maybe Patrick had a a little bit of trouble on his initial start. Throughout the rest of the field, though, everyone's still pretty close to each other. Maybe a little bit too close for comfort. Kenny Tripp still in the lead of this one. Jonathan Emerson, Brandon Kiger, Scott Bendix, and Brent Mex, your top 5. Looking around the speedway. So the drivers that we saw up in the front now a little bit further back after they've made their initial pit stops. Mark Whitley in that 77. He's down 4 positions here this evening. Down in the 8th spot now. And Paul Hartwood Jr. down 7 positions from where he started. So a bit of ground he needs to make back up in that 34 machine. We did get word down from the race control that the 18 of Braden Fuller was given an end-of-line penalty for incident responsibility in that previous caution. Fuller currently riding back in the 18th position. So he's got a bit of ground he needs to make back up here this evening. But he's still on the lead lap. That is definitely something that he can work with here tonight. Further up in the field, side by side for Mark Whitley and Derek Colson. Colson in that 5 machine up 9 positions from where he qualified. He is a driver we saw all the way back in the consolation race. And now he's up here duking it out inside of the top 10 in that Tony Stewart Foundation number 5. Maybe not necessarily the way he wanted his heat race to go. But that driver out of Greensburg, Indiana definitely has some speed to him. Last week, Colson finished back. Let's see, where did Colson finish? Actually, it's looking like Colson did not make the main event last week at Langley. He was the driver on the cut line in the consolation race and just didn't quite have what he needed to make it into the main event. So tonight, he made it on in, and now he's duking it out up in the top 10. Call that quite a rebound after maybe not the week he was going for back at the Langley Speedway. Side by side, just a few positions ahead of them, that's Will Salamone and Brent Mex battling it out. Salamone down in that Hot Wheels entry, Mex in the Taco Bell entry. And Mark Whitley, he's getting involved in this little battle as well, trying to make any gains he can from a driver being stuck up on the high line. We've seen a high line work on restarts, but in the longer run of things, it's looking like maybe not quite what they need to make it work for them. And Whitley going to be making the pass on Salomon there, a bit up high through the corner. And now he's going to be putting the pressure down on Mex and that 88. That's Scott Benedict's up there inside the top 4. Whitley is currently the highest driver on the field in terms of position who has made a pit stop. He pitted, of course, under that first yellow on lap 30. Everyone in front of him has yet to come down pit lane. A little bit of a nudge there between Whitley and Mex, though. Mex up on the high line. Just barely inches of room between these two late models, and Whitley's going to make the pass. Whitley now back up inside the top 5. Brent Mex not giving up that easily, though, but holding on up there on that high line is going to be very, very difficult. And now Salomon's going to be going down low. He's going to capitalize on Mex being stuck up there as well. And it looks like we have a driver down on pit lane. Tarek Golson has pulled it on down in that number 5 machine. We were just talking about him making it up inside the top 10. And now he's all the way back down in 22nd after coming down, taking what looks like 4 tires under green. Definitely an interesting strategy call by the crew of the number 5. That we've seen weirder strategies work out in the past before, so definitely do not write off the driver of that Tony Stewart Foundation late model. Up in the front, though, Paul Hartwig falling back just a little bit from the top 5, but he has 2 drivers absolutely duking it out right behind him. Very nearly 3 wide as Dylan Hahn gets him 3 wide. Actually 3 wide here at the USA International Speedway. Dylan Hahn, he's been really patient here this evening outside of the top 10 for most of the opening stages of this race. Now up into 7th and ready to try and get inside the top 5. He took home a win last week at Langley. He said he feels like USA is a speedway where he can do it again, and I'll tell you what, race fans, he is absolutely pushing that late model to try and make it happen. Just in front of him, Paul Hartwood Jr. in the number 34, the Exalta entry. And something important to note about that number 34 driver going to be the candidate for the lucky starting spot dice roll, as we tend to call it here. Started up in the 2nd position, so Hartwig rolled, got the lucky dice roll. If he manages to take home the win, that's a very big if. If he manages to take home the win, he will be taking home $45 here this evening. If not, then the cycle repeats anew next week at the National Fairgrounds Speedway. It'll be bumped up to $50. And a new lucky starting spot will be rolled, so definitely going to have to keep an eye on the number 34 and see if they could be the first driver here in Palms to actually take home that lucky starting spot bonus. Currently running back into the 6th position, and they are right there, nose to tail, with 2 drivers battling it out. 3 wide once again here at the USA International Speedway. Mark Whitley up inside the top 5, but he does not have a comfortable spot there by any means. And we have 2 drivers coming down into pit lane. Kenny Tripp, Jonathan Emerson, Scott Benedicts all just came down pit lane just like that. That was quite a scary situation. I don't know if all those late model drivers were necessarily ready for these 3 to dive it on down to pit lane, but sure enough, that's your race leader and other drivers from the top 3 all coming down to pit lane. 2 tires going to be the call for Emerson. 2 tires going to be the call for Tripp. Look like 2 tires going to be the call for all 3 of our race leaders that just came down pit lane. And just like that, that's going to shuffle Brandon Kiger up to the front, and Kiger is going to come down pit lane. And that now sets Mark Whitley as our race leader. Paul Hartwood Jr., Dylan Hahn, your top 3. All 3 of these drivers have come down pit lane at this point in the race. So all 3 of them should be good to go for another, call it about 30 laps on fuel, I want to say, on the assumption that they took full fuel under their first pit stops. 65 laps in the books though, and drivers starting to make their way back out onto the speedway. That is definitely going to shake up our timing and scoring sheet for the time being as drivers get green flag pit stops taken care of. Of course, that is going to be bringing lap traffic into the question as well. You see Brent Mex down there, he's coming down out of pit lane now. Mex currently being scored back into the 19th position. Going to be scored 2 laps down after his pit stop. A couple more drivers coming down. That's Tommy Mitchell, who was at that point the last driver on the lead lap, going to be making his pit stop now. I think the big question right now is, are the drivers that elected to stay out under those first 2 cautions now starting to sweat the load just a little bit? Of course, there's always the potential for more cautions to come out, especially as these race leaders duke it out here. Whitley falling back 2 positions in a single lap just like that. But depending on how the remainder of this race plays out, it could bite them all in the behind for not coming down under yellow. So you will just have to see, will this race go green long enough for the remaining cars on the lead lap to make their pit stops happen and then cycle everyone that's a lap down back onto the lead lap. If not, when the next yellow flag comes out, I would imagine all these drivers still out here on the lead lap going to come down without having to worry about losing a lap. And that would only have Thomas, Hendren, and Emerson being the lucky dogs. So that would still trap Kiger, Benedicts, Mex, Colson, and everyone on down the list a lap down if it doesn't play out in their favors here tonight. A little bit further back, Chase Johnson making the pass on that 10 of Steven Rex. Johnson currently going back into the 6th position. One of the drivers that has taken home wins here this season. Johnson took home the win back at the Thompson Speedway, the closest speedway so far to the USA International Speedway. Just a little bit shorter, but similar in style with these just really long straightaways and then somewhat narrow banked corners. So Johnson, last week back at Langley Speedway, he finished back in the 11th position, was involved in a couple of unfortunate cautions. Looking to maybe see if he can't make up for last week's event here tonight. Not gonna be easy though. Whole lot of fast drivers up in front of him. He has to try and figure out his way around. The battle for the lead not getting any less intense as the laps tick down, especially as lap traffic starts to get involved here. The 34 and the 42, the two drivers on your screen that are being scored on the lead lap here. Paul Hartwood Jr., the leader of the race. Dylan Hahn, last week's winner, just behind. And once again, we find a driver potentially in a position to take home that lucky starting spot bonus. Last week, we saw a driver actually lead laps that had that lucky starting spot rolled, and things were looking really good for them to take home that bonus, and then a couple of late race cautions turned the race completely on its head. So not to jinx Hartwig here, but it could happen. It is very much a possibility for the driver of that 34 machine. Further back in the field, the last two drivers on the lead lap actually battling it out. That is Johnny B and Justin Phipps duking out. Johnny B already making up a pretty big amount of ground in that orange 26 we saw down at the bottom right of the corner of the screen for a moment there. They were battling it out, but then lap traffic really shook things up for them, and now Justin Phipps going to be coming down pit lane. Dylan Hahn also going to be making his stop here tonight. 78 laps in the books. More drivers electing to make green flag pit stops, a very risky move. But the fact we've managed to keep it green for a good, call it about 50 laps now, is looking good for these drivers to actually have green flag pit stops work out in their favor. And of course, as we draw closer and closer to lap 90, I expect that around lap 90 or so, we're going to have to see our race leaders come back down pit lane as well. We can take a look down at our pit strategy box here for these drivers, and it's a little bit all over the place. Mostly the drivers up in the front, drivers that did come down under that initial yellow. Chase Johnson already having 3 pit stops to his name, so maybe he had a little bit of a mishap on pit lane on that second stop, because that third stop, quite literally the next lap. Same deal for Mr. Johnny B. Looks like either trying to short pit really well on that second stop, or just had a little bit of difficulty on the first stop, decided he needed to come back down again. Either way, looking at the stint lengths, it looks like it's about 50 laps or so far that these drivers have managed to go on the stint. Emerson and Tripp had to come down on laps, or 61 laps into the race, so going off at what I know of how Tripp and Emerson tend to do their fuel strategies, I'm thinking here that the fuel window is only going to let you go 60 laps at best, and that means that we are clicking down the laps that our race leaders have until they have to come down as well. Jumping down further in the field, it's even more mixed up as we get further back in the back. Drivers a little bit all over the place in their pit strategies, but hey, variety is the spice of life, and you never know who might just have the winning game plan here. A little bit of contact there between Chase Johnson in that 6 of Tommy Mitchell. Tommy Mitchell currently being scored a lap down, so he is not battling for a position with that 83 machine. Chase trying to figure out a way around him, and then he can start trying to think about battling with Mark Whitley for the top 3 here this evening. And again, we are drawing nearer and nearer to time for our race leaders to have to come down pit lane. But for the time being, let's take a moment to let y'all all appreciate these late model stock cars in all their glory. It's time to bring the noise, presented by our friends over at Harpoon Design. And just like that, we get right to the good bit and the caution flag out on the speedway. It's sounding like the trouble might be for Tommy Mitchell here this evening, the driver of that number 6 machine. Let's take a look back, see if we can't figure out what all went down here. Looking down at the Menards, number 6 here, going down into turns 1 and 2. That's Mark Whitley just in front of him. A little bit of a nudge to Mark Whitley. And then a little bit of a nudge from behind from Chase Johnson. So just a lapped car stuck in a pretty unfortunate situation there. A little bit of a nudge to the race. Not the race leader, but one of the drivers. Oh, no. Oh no. Well, race fans, we chose to rewind the footage at a very unfortunate place here. Let's play it back here again, and this time we'll let it play out all the way here. A little bit of bump to Whitley. He slows it up, and then a little bit of nudge from behind from Chase Johnson. And you think that's it. You think that's the end of the incident, that's that. But we wait a moment, and we wait a moment. Mitchell brings it back around. And there's the 66 of Brent Max. I think we're pretty obligated to go on board with Brent Mex here and get a bit of a look of what all just happened to that 66 machine. Battling it out with that Exalted driver of Paul Hartwood Jr. and then just a little bit of wrong place, wrong time there, and that sounds like potentially some race-ending damage for Brent Mex there with the impact he had at the front of that machine. But with this yellow coming out, we are going to get a couple of drivers put back up a lap. Sounds like it's going to be Jonathan Emerson, Kenny Tripp, and Dylan Hahn going to be our 3 lucky dogs for this caution. So 3 drivers going to be getting laps back. I believe that that will put those 3 drivers all back on the lead lap here. A couple of drivers electing to use this yellow to make pit stops, though. John Friley came down, Mark Whitley down on pit lane, Christian Tinkler, Paul Hartwig, Johnny B, Stephen Rex, Art Hendren, PJ Thomas, and it's looking like Justin Phipps and Sean Patrick all came down under this caution flag. So that now puts every driver out on the speedway with the exception of Brandon Kiger, Scott Benedicts, and Will Salamone as having made multiple pit stops here this evening. Those 3 still have only made 1 stop so far. Looking like they're all really trying to go the fuel strategy method here of just stretching it as long as they can, spending as little time as possible down on pit lane, making as few stops as possible. Or some of the other drivers being a little bit more generous with it. Justin Phipps, who currently is being scored back to the 18th position, has actually come down 4 times now. But Chase Johnson has come down 3 times. John Friley 2, Mark Whitley 2, Tinkler 2. Then Johnny B, Stephen Rex, Paul Hartwig Jr. all have come down 3 times. So inside the top 10, a little bit of varying strategy here this evening, but it is looking like Chase Johnson is being scored as our race leader when we go green flag racing here. Again, of course, Chase Johnson elected to stay out. His last pit stop was back on lap 38. That feels like a very long time ago. That's going to be John Friley starting to his outside, up 13 positions from where he started. Mark Whitley and Kristen Tinkler rounding out your top 4 here tonight. Everyone behind Chase Johnson has made a pit stop, and looking at the pit times, it looks like everyone behind Chase Johnson has some brand new Hoosier tires slapped on the sides of those late models. So it's going to be a very hairy restart. Will Chase Johnson be able to get the launch he needs with 60 lap older tires than the rest of the field? Green flag up in the air once again, and Johnson actually looks like he has a pretty good thing going for him. I was a bit worried those tires would be worn down more than they are, and a little bit of trouble there. John Friley into the outside wall. He had to drift down to the low lane just a little bit. But yeah, let's wait for these lap times to click on by as these drivers cross the line. And Chase Johnson was actually the fastest driver on the speedway that time by, even on these 60 lap old tires. He is still setting down some incredibly fast lap times in that 83 machine. Mark Whitley back in position number 2. Christian Tinkler, he got around John Friley as well, so he's going to be finding himself up inside the podium for the first time here this evening. Stephen Rex, that number 10 dropping bombs racing entry. I feel like he has been basically in every position out on the speedway here tonight, but right now Rex is running in the top 5, and I say that and he gets passed by Paul Hartwig. Sorry about that, Stephen, not trying to give you the commentator's curse here this evening. But currently, while he is in 5th, he is one of the only drivers on the speedway to be in the position where he qualified, and funnily enough, the only other driver on the speedway that can say that is his teammate of Sean Patrick, who is currently running back in 19th. Whitley is closing the gap on Johnson, though, and Whitley might just be trying to use those newer tires to go. Oh, okay. And Chase Johnson, he's going to come on down pit lane. It looks like maybe that strategy didn't quite work out for him, because he had to come down 3-4 laps after that yellow, and it looked like he actually impacted that safety barrier just a bit with the right front there, so that's going to be a little bit of damage on our race leader. Just like that, though, now the title of race leader is going to be going to Mark Whitley. Just like that, Whitley, he took home the win back at Martinsville, and now he is leading the field with almost a full second of gap here. And it's Just 2 by 2 behind him. That's Paul Hartwig Jr. and Christian Tinkler side by side. John Friley was on the outside of Steven Rex for just a moment. He's going to back out of that, though. 103 laps now is the distance, though. So officially, we have crossed into 2/3 of the way through this race. Less than 50 laps left to go here at the USA International Speedway. The clock is ticking for these drivers. There is not that much race left to play with. And if I had to guess, I'm thinking that everyone who did hit under that yellow should be good to go on fuel for the remainder of this race. They definitely will be if a caution comes out, but if we keep it green flag racing, they will be pretty close to the line, but they should all be good on fuel. The question is going to be, are these drivers confident enough in that knowledge to stay out for the remainder of the race, or are they going to play it safe, maybe get a splash and dash in the final couple of laps of tonight's event? Currently looking at the battle for 4th place here. Christian Tinkler up 3 positions, John Friley up 10 positions, and John Friley isn't even the biggest mover. That is going to go back to that 26 sim experience of Johnny B. Johnny B, currently our biggest mover of the evening, up 14 positions from where he started here tonight. The driver out of North Branford, Connecticut. We saw him back at the back of the field in his consolation race, back at the field in his heat race, and now he's up here running in the 6th position and looking to try and get himself inside the top 5. What a turnaround for that sim experienced driver. Coming into tonight's event, Johnny B being scored back into the 15th position in the championship standings. In front of him, Corey Blevins, a driver that was not able to attend here tonight, and then David Cannon, another driver that is not out on the speedway. So Johnny B could be looking to pump himself up at least 2 positions on the championship standings, and the next driver up in front of him, that is John Friley, who is 2 positions in front of him. So not quite enough to get around John Friley in the championship standings at this moment. But depending on how these remaining 40 laps play out, we could see Johnny B bump himself up potentially all the way to maybe even 11th, because Wesley Ray Jr. is tied in the championship standings with John Friley. And Ray currently is being scored back to the 13th position, so things definitely going to be jumbled up in the mid-pack of the championship standings here this evening. Mark Whitley leading the race. In front of him in the championship standings, Shane Kohlmeyer, of course, the driver, one of the drivers who wasn't able to attend tonight's event, and Kenny Tripp, who is currently being scored back into the 9th position. So a win here, if the race ends how the field is looking right now, that would absolutely make Mark Whitley our new championship leader going into the Nashville Fairgrounds next week. But again, there's still a whole lot of what ifs at play here. There is a lot of race left here tonight, and it's honestly just too early to call how things are going to play out here. Currently looking back at a battle that is not for position. This is going to be Chase Johnson, Art Hendren, and Will Salamone, who are all currently being scored as a lap down here this evening, battling it out. And Salomon's way up high, so Johnson going to get around him without too much difficulty. He'll bump himself up to the 13th position. Only 1 spot down from where he qualified, but when we see Johnson up inside the top 10, not necessarily where he wants his evening to be. And it's looking like maybe a little bit of technical difficulties here out here on the speedway, so we'll be back in just a moment as we get that sorted out here tonight. Alrighty, race fans, we are back. Someone was kind enough to cut the connection to the broadcast cameras, but we have it going here again. And hopefully, whatever idiot did that has been kicked out of the broadcast booth. 25 laps left to go here this evening. Mark Whitley still in the lead of tonight's event with 25 laps left to go. Paul Hartwig Jr., though, is right behind him. He has not given him any breathing room in these past couple of laps. With 25 laps left to go, Whitley's just going to have to hang on to this one. He's going to have to play a little bit of defense here and hope that Hartwig doesn't manage to make any moves here. Looking at the pit strategy, though, last time that they made their pit stops, Whitley's pit stop was about 20 seconds longer than Hartwig, so that looks like Hartwig might have only taken fuel. Mark might be on somewhat newer tires here as the race leader, but last time by they set identical lap times, so tires may not be making all of that much of a deciding factor here for our race leaders tonight. 23 laps left to go here this evening. Race leaders should be good to go on fuel. I don't think that anyone inside of our top 10 will have any worries whatsoever about fuel in the remainder of this race. It's all going to be coming down to racecraft and a little bit of raw pace. That 42 machine back there, that's Dylan Hahn. Hahn is not currently being scored on the lead lap as he ended up having to hit under green at lap 115 during that technical difficulty moment. And sure enough, Hartwig is going to dive down low, make the pass for the lead. And Hahn, while being sort of lapped down, still setting lap times that are actually, looks like last time by was faster than either of our race leaders in that 42 machine, so I would not be surprised if Hahn is able to get around our race leader, Paul Hartwig, in here just a second as well. Our race leader is going to be going up high to let the lap car pass him. Generally, it tends to go the other way around, but Dylan Hahn setting some blistering lap times here this evening. Last time by, Hahn set a 21.73 compared to our race leader, a 22.01, Mark Whitley a 21.95, and Rex a 21.82. So Hahn is a whole 0.15 seconds faster than our race leaders at the time being. 18 laps left to go, though a whole lot can change in these final remaining couple of laps. Most of the field looking pretty spread out here tonight. Pretty single file around the speedway. The closest battle on the speedway actually is the battle we have going on between Steven Rex and Mark Whitley, and even then that's about, call it about 0.4 of a second between these two drivers here. Taking a bit of a top-down look at the speedway, you can see just how much of a gap there is around for everyone. That 36 of Will Salomon behind Steven Rex, of course, not on the lead lap. And that 5 right there, that is Derek Colson, another driver currently being scored a lap down that our race leaders just having to navigate around here. But Steven Rex finding himself up inside the top 3, currently looking to try and get what should be his best ever finish here in the Pro American Late Model Series. A little bit further back in the field, currently a couple laps down, this is Mark Whitley battling it out with the other Droppin' Bombs racing driver. That's Sean Patrick in that 17. And it looks like Sean Patrick maybe not having the tires necessary to hold on to these positions, because Scott Bendix just got around him without a single care in the world in that number 88 Lucas Oil entry. Kenny Tripp He's all the way back in 7th right now, but he is starting to catch up to the rest of the field just a little bit. That 23 of Jonathan Emerson, the only driver in the picture here that is on the lead lap. So the 12 and the 23 battling for position. Not quite the top 5, but 6th place is still where you need to be if you want to be on the outside looking in. 12 laps left to go, and Tripp passes Emerson without too much difficulty whatsoever. Emerson is falling back like there is a parachute strapped to the back of that Portland glass number 23. In a single lap, the gap already up to a 2nd between these two drivers. Kenny Tripp, he pitted on the same lap as Emerson, so there shouldn't be that much tire difference between the two of them, but Tripp definitely has some speed left in this late model. Will it be enough to catch him back up to Christian Tinkler, though? Remains to be seen. 10 laps left to go out here on the speedway. 10 laps left to settle the score here in Lakeland, Florida, for heading on up to the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway for 175 laps at one of the incredibly historic racetracks here on the IRC.com platform. 9 laps left to go, though. Paul Hartwick Jr. is holding on to the lead of this one, but Whitley is right there in that Harpoon design number 77. Leslie Ray Jr. going to be coming down pit lane, as well as Braden Fuller and Brent Meck. So a couple of drivers maybe not having the fuel they needed to get to the end of this one. With 8 laps left to go, though, going to be 7 when we cross the line. Whitley is still maintaining that 0.2 of a gap between himself and Hartwick Jr. Starting to close the gap down the front stretch. Will he be able to maintain it through 3 and 4? And it's looking like, yeah, Whitley definitely still has some speed to him. He is closing the gap. Last time by, Whitley was a 1/10 of a second faster than Paul Hartwick Jr. So Whitley has potential here. He can make this happen, but it really is anyone's game. There's the 10 of Sean Patrick. He's pulling it up high. He wants nothing to do with this battle for the lead. Whitley's going to pull it up high, though. He's going to try and make a pass on the high side here yet again. Going to back out of it. Tries to go down low for the crossover, and Hartwick defends pretty hard, and now they're side by side again. Returns 3 and 4. Not quite the run needed to make it happen. 4 laps left to go here at the USA International Speedway, though. Whitley falling back a little bit down on the back stretch, but he's making that speed back up in the corner, and another lap car up in front of them. That's the 37 Bart Hendren. Hendren gonna pull it up high again. That lap car. Oh, he's gonna pull it back down low. Maybe a little bit of a scare there for Hartwick. Hendren down on that low line. Both race leaders gonna get around him without any trouble, but that is going to narrow the gap just a tiny bit between our race leaders. With 2 laps left to go, Whitley is falling back just a little bit. It's all going to come down to these final couple of corners. Will Whitley be able to make it up? And Paul Hartwig's having a little bit of connection issues, but white flag up in the air. 0.3 of a second between Mark Whitley and Paul Hartwick Jr. But that gap is closing. I don't think it's going to be enough. And the white flag, or the checkered flag, in fact, up in the air. Paul Hartwick Jr. going to get it done here at the USA International Speedway. Set the fastest lap time in practice. And now he can crown himself a winner here in the Pro American Late Model Series. Mark Whitley, Steven Rex, your top three. John Friley, Christian Tinkler, rounding outside the top five. John Friley getting his best ever finish here in Palms. What an event it has been here this evening for these drivers. And of course, our race winner, Paul Hartwig Jr., burning it down here on the front stretch of a speedway that has existed on the iRacing.com platform for a longer duration than it existed in the real world. Sounds a little bit like he might be trying to blow out that engine, but for the time being, race fans, we will be back here in just a moment with interviews with your top three finishers here this evening. So don't go anywhere, race fans, and we will be back in just a moment. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the Pro American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. Welcome back to the USA International Speedway, and welcome to our friend Paul Hartwig Jr. for taking home a win here tonight and being the first driver here in the Pro American Late Model Series to take home the win with the lucky starting spot bonus. So you'll be getting a nice little $45 bonus for taking home this win. How are you feeling now that you've got everything said and done here tonight?
Well, really, this is a fast car. It was all about saving tires, you know. I still had one set of tires left, you know. It was just all about saving. Um, just want to be without JT Curran for spotting me. He was really on my toes. Yeah, those lap cars were scaring me. I kept looking at my fuel. I was really nervous trying to save fuel there, so just want to be out without my all my guys from here.
Yeah, I saw you were running a little bit of a different strategy here tonight, and I was a little concerned that you were going to be out of fuel. And I think I heard you say earlier that you actually ran out of fuel crossing the finish line. So that was a very daring strategy, but it played out for you. So I got to give a big congratulations to you and everyone at your team for managing to make that work here tonight. Next week, heading to Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. How do you feel going to a bit of a shorter track than this one?
Oh, so it's all about saving tires and then just being on your toes because last Langley we didn't really have a good finish. Well, hopefully we have a good competition for next week's and hopefully we bring it home again.
Good deal. Well, congratulations on your win. And of course, before I send you out to go and celebrate, The microphone's all yours. Who you want to thank for getting that 34 machine up here in Victory Lane?
Well, this would be about with my mom, my dad, Bobby Geiger, JT Curran, K2 Shocks, Patrick Pool, Jersey Shore Contracting, Morgan Senior Ace Engine, Surfside Collision, Ace Landscape and BNB Paving, First Horizon Reality Corp, LaJoy Sheets, BNO Fabrication Work, Trucking, Velocity, South Car Care, LBI, everybody else that helps me.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out. Congratulations on your win. Congratulations for being the first driver in the league to take home the bonus. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
And finishing back in position number 2, it's the Harpoon Design driver himself, Mark Whitley. You've been up here in the booth once before for a win, and tonight you're here for a second place finish. What do you think might have had to have gone different in those last couple of laps for you to have taken home the checkered flag tonight?
Yeah, really, I knew it was gonna be close on gas, so I was really to make sure we had enough at the end. And Polly was catching us pretty good, and I figured because he pitted right before that caution came out, so I figured he had about a lap more. Like he went out there a lap longer, so he had a little bit less fuel. And as hard as he was pushing, I really thought he wouldn't have enough. And so when he caught me the first time, I was like, all right, maybe I'll push it a little bit, trying to stay in front of him. And I started using the fuel up more than I liked. And I was like, all right, I'll just let him go. And, I don't think he'll be able to make it as hard as he's pushing. And after I let him go, about 10 laps later, it was getting close where I could start pushing it again because I had felt comfortable enough in the amount of gas we had. And I think he had realized it by that point and was saving. And then we started catching him. And there was one time I think I had him jacked up all the way down the back straightaway. And I guess hindsight, maybe I should have just kept him jacked up until we got to the corner and went up underneath him, but didn't really want to do that. It just worked out. We were able to push really hard at the end and just couldn't get around them. These cars are really hard to pass. They're so momentum based. You have to really get a run. It's hard to get a run, especially on old tires, and just didn't have enough to get around them. Like I said, I think he ran out of gas trying to do a burnout. So it was close. I think if I'd have known hindsight, I probably wouldn't have let him go by so easy the second time. I just really didn't think he was going to be able to make it on gas.
Yeah, he was definitely cutting it really close, but just barely the amount necessary to make it to the end. But either way, a second place finish still incredibly solid. You still finished in front of Kenny Tripp and Shane Kohlmeyer, so that should be bumping you up to the top of the championship standings heading into next week. And of course, next week, Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. How do you feel heading on over to a track with a whole lot more history to it than this one has?
Yeah, well, this one's nothing but history because they don't exist anymore. But Nashville, I feel pretty good about. I've had a lot of strong runs in there and other vehicles. Obviously, this one's being brand new. It's so much different, even compared to the old quote unquote late model stock we had. So it's just going to be a learning experience. I've pretty much used all 30 minutes of practices every time we've gotten it. Usually, I'm not really a stickler for practice, but I feel like with this car, you kind of need to get a handle on it and figure out what it's doing since it's so new. Hopefully, we can maybe run up front some more, snag another win, or at least another top 5, and just keep in touch with Kenny because he's blazing fast everywhere. So it's just going to be about which one of us can avoid the big mistakes. I know we've both been involved in some wrecks the last couple weeks, and thankfully I think he got caught out on strategy a little bit in the middle of the race and had to pit under green, and we went a lap down. So maybe hopefully we can keep capitalizing and finishing in front of them, and hopefully get to the end of the season leading the points. But it's a long way away. So right now we're just focusing on getting good, clean, consistent finishes.
Well, that sounds like a pretty darn good plan to me. For now, though, before I let you head out and celebrate getting another podium to your name and get some practice under your belt for Nashville Fairgrounds, the microphone's all yours, Mr. Whitley. Who do you want to thank for getting up here on the podium tonight?
Oh, yeah, big shout out Brantley over at Harpoon Design. I know he stepped up and he's the title sponsor for this series, so does awesome work. So if anybody out there needs a paint scheme done, he's the man for it. Check out his website at harpoondesign.com. He's got a little link, a little form you can fill out at the bottom tell him what you want. He'll get back with you pretty quickly. He does amazing work and he does really fast work. So check him out. And then he's also got like almost I think 2 or 3. He got a lot of paint schemes over on Trading Paint if you want to check out some of his other work. And then I guess shout out to you putting on the broadcast in the league. This was by far the best race we've had all season. Hopefully we can continue that streak, and next week maybe we'll go caution free the whole time. It's like we've gotten better and better, and like I said, this week it was only 3 cautions, so it was a pretty good race all in all. So big shout out to them.
Good deal. Well, congratulations on the podium finish here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, sounds good.
And bringing it on home here in the 3rd position here tonight, one of the Dropping Bombs racing drivers, I believe, getting your best ever finish here with the league, if I remember correctly. Steven, you made it happen here tonight. How'd you do it?
Not much with strategy. I was saving some fuel at the beginning. I was just basing it off the last race. There was a lot of cautions, and I'm like, well, if I can just clutch every corner, and I did that on that first run till the yellow came out. I'm like, I could save some fuel and be good. And didn't happen on the first run, but it happened a few runs later. I was able to stretch it on fuel, and I was about 2 laps from pulling in, and that yellow came out, and that kind of saved me. Other than that, my strategy was shot. And then I should have took tires earlier, and I didn't. I went into the pits, forgot to check fuel, so I had to go back in. I was just giving up track position all night. So to get a 3rd place finish out of it, that was pretty good.
Yeah, definitely a pretty solid run for you, especially considering all the difficulties you had. And if nothing else, that's more experience you can bring with you heading on into Nashville Fairgrounds next week.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm just a part-time runner of this series. I won't be able to make it next week. I'm just trying to hit half the races. Hopefully, if work doesn't get in the way. But yeah, I think 3rd. You mentioned earlier. I think 3rd is my best finish. I had a couple good runs and some practice races, but I think this is only my 3rd or 4th race with the series. But I'm liking it so far. Everything that Matt and Steve have put together. You do a great job of broadcasting. I like to go back and listen to them. Bad thing is, I put my phone in my little holder coming out the vents of my car, and I got the video playing, and I'm listening to it. Probably shouldn't do it. So kids at home, don't do that. But I got a decent hour each way to work when I go to the office, so it makes the time go by a lot easier.
Hey, if it works, it works. And of course, a very big congratulations to you for managing to come out here, especially as a part-time driver, and manage to take home a podium finish. That is a pretty dang impressive feat. But for now, before I let you head out and celebrate your podium, who you want to thank for getting you up here?
Yeah, as I said, everybody for putting it on. The guys over at DBR, it's a fixed setup, and we're not working on setups, but uh, we just like to chit chat during the race, give each other a hard time, and have some fun.
Good deal. Well, congratulations on getting up here. I know we won't be seeing you again next week, but hopefully we'll see you out there on the track again soon. And I'm sure there will be folks out there in the chat rooting for you.
Yep. All right. I appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do.
Yes, sir. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, you too.
You heard it here first, race fans. Your top 3 finishers here tonight: Paul Hartwig Jr., Mark Whitley, and Steven Rex. 2 of those 3 drivers getting their best ever finishes here with the league tonight. So definitely off to a heck of a season here tonight. Only 3 rounds into it as well. Next week, same day, same time, heading on over to the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Before we close it out for the evening, though, let's take a look down at our unofficial race results as they stand here tonight. Paul Hartwig Jr., of course, taking on home the win. Mark Whitley, Steven Rex, the drivers we all spoke to, bringing home the podium here tonight. John Friley in the 126, finishing back and forth, also his best ever finish here in the league. 5th place going back to that 38 of Christian Tinkler, with Kenny Tripp in the 12 back in 6th. Johnny V in 7th. Jonathan Emerson in 8th. Chase Johnson, one of those early race winners, bringing it on back in 9th with another race winner, actually, of Dylan Hahn in the 42, rounding out the top 10. 11th going to go back to the 37 of Art Hendren, with Justin Phipps back in 12th. Wesley Ray Jr. in 13th, Scott Benedict's 14th. Mr. Derek Colson rounding out the top 15. PJ Thomas in that 28, bringing it home 16. Sean Patrick for Dropping Bombs Racing, bringing it home 17th. Will Salamander Salamone back in 18th. 19th going to go back to Brandon Kiger with the Fast Pass 18 of Braden Fuller, bringing it home 20th. Brent Mex back in 21st, and Tommy Mitchell rounding out the field here this evening. And I'll tell you what, race fans, tonight these late model drivers have turned the standings on its head here tonight. Gonna have to keep an eye out for that heading on into next week, seeing where all of these drivers have been shuffled around in the championship. Because I'll tell you what, things are going to be looking very, very different at the Nashville Fairgrounds next week. For now, though, that's all we've got here tonight at the USA International Speedway. A big thank you to everyone for tuning in, from me up here in the broadcast booth, from everyone at the Pro American Late Model Series, and from the folks over at Harpoon Design. Thank you all for coming out. I hope you have a good rest of your evening, race fans.